Southampton Water, famous for its cruise ships, as you can see here, and on the other side the town of Hythe. Not very far as the crow flies, but hell on earth, or hell on wheels I should say, if you are having to rely on road transport. Thank goodness therefore for the Hythe Pier Tramway, and I'm just making this little program as my tribute to its celebration in 2022 of 100 years of continuous operation, the longest continuous operating pier railway in the world as recognised by the Guinness Book of Records. So let's take a trip, shall we? We begin at Southampton to board the ferry. Tramway goes hand in hand with the ferry. If one fails, the chances are the other one would too. And certainly there have been some very precarious times in the existence of both the ferry service and the pier railway. Fortunately, I think it must have been about 5 years ago or so now, Red Funnel Ferries of Southampton agreed to take on the failing service, and although it seems that they've cut the service down to one ferry an hour, it's enough to justify its continuing existence, and that's good news for the residents of Hythe. That's certainly something that they are probably very grateful for. The terminal in Southampton is probably about a 10-minute walk from the city centre, so not that far if you're commuting in the morning. And well, let's get on board the ferry, shall we, and get going. I said Red Funnel Ferries, didn't I? I do apologise. I mean Blue Funnel, which is a completely separate operator. It's Blue Funnel Ferries that run the service now. Sorry for the bad sound quality on here. I was filming this quite a few years ago now on one of my very early digital cameras, so as with all things, they were brand new technology at the time, not really up to scratch, but I've left the sound in on the lowest volume I can set it, so you do get an idea of a bit of the atmosphere as we cruise along Solent before we cross over to Hythe. And on the way you'll notice we pass the Queen Mary and one of those large motor vehicle carriers that come from the Far East. And at this point we leave those large ships, we turn right and we head across, well, probably not the Solent really, is it? Southampton Water, that's probably more accurate. And there is Hythe Pier coming into view as we head for the landing stage. And just a quick look back. It's only the pier head station, if you could call it that, that has this little overall roof, and here's everybody trying to scramble onto the little two-coach train they got there. This probably is one of the most unique things you'll ever travel on, so if you get the chance to go and visit, I certainly would recommend it. In 1917, the War Department commissioned from Brush Engineering some battery-operated locomotives to work in their mustard gas factory at Avonmouth. When the war was over, obviously these were surplus. So the Hythe Pier Tramway bought 3 of these little locomotives in 1922, though only 2 survive. They were little steeple cabs, but were altered to form these, what you see now with these open sides there, although the large rear window wasn't put in until about 1980-ish. They were converted to operate, and the system is a DC third rail similar to that on the mainland, but only operating at 250 volts. And that might seem a very primitive control system, but it's simple and it works, and you could probably manufacture any of the parts that you need. It's sturdy, it's tough, and that's why it's still operating after 100 years. How many of today's sophisticated electronic control systems can you say will be around in 30 or 40 years even? Not many, I'll bet. This is a tribute to British engineering at its best. Now, I'm not entirely sure of my facts here, but so far as I can understand it, the building on the right was the old toll house here, and when the Pier Tramway was built, it became the ticket office. Well, that was superseded not long after the railway opened by the current ticket office, which you see on the left. Now, I spoke before about the horrendous journey by car to Southampton. Well, that's really only come about since the closure of another railway that went through Hythe, and this was the line that went down to Forley, and that served the big refinery down there. Now, these pictures were taken, as I say, quite a few years ago now, when the line was still in use for the occasional tanker train. Since then, this part of the line has been totally mothballed, but there are plans to resurrect it and to start a commuter service into Southampton. If that should ever happen, will it be a threat to the Hythe Ferry and the Pier Railway? Somehow I don't think so. I think there'll be enough people using it, but you never know. That's one of these unknown quantities, isn't it? Anyway, back to the tramway now, and I need to talk about the carriages. On the day I visited, not a single one of the staff could tell me when they were built. One of them did say, "Oh, I think it was just after the last war," but subsequent research has found that they're actually original to the line, so they're 100 years old and all, obviously subject to the usual maintenance work and replacement and rotting woodwork, but essentially they're 100 years old. The carriages came first, not the driving trailers, as it were, and they came in 1922. And first off, when the line was opened, you had a locomotive at each end running it push and pull. When these driving trailers were built a year later, 1923, and all built by Bagley, by the way, it settled down to the pattern you see here. You've got the locomotive always at the shore end, pushing on the way out, pulling on the way back. And in the front of the train here, you'll see this flat truck, and that carries bicycles, suitcases, all sorts of luggage and pushchairs, and that, effectively the freight wagon. And as you can see, that driving trailer there has a set of control gear, so the train can be operated from the front on its way out to the pier head. And here's a view of the workshops at the shore end. Those two little sidings there, non-electrified, but I can only assume that the locos, if they have to go in there for servicing, are either pushed in or run on battery or some other way. That tank wagon there, I don't know if it's still used for the same purpose, but once upon a time that was used for refueling the ferry boats. So here's a driver's eye view looking along towards the terminus at the other end. I'm going to follow this up with a couple of close-ups. Primitive camera, and you'll see how the close-ups distort the track and the boardwork on the pier. Rather amusing, but just thought I'd throw that in for good measure. Now, as well as the whole railway being unusual, there are other unusual things to see at Hythe, including these rather large jellyfish that I found lying on the shore. Which brings me to the end of this video, and I'm finishing here with another unusual view. This is of the Queen Mary 2, but it's taken from the shore station on the Hythe Pier Tramway, so that ship is quite a distance away. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this little delve into the history of one of Britain's most unique things. Not a lot of people know about it, but now you do. Maybe if you haven't been there to have a look, do go and have a look for yourself. 100 years old this year. Many congratulations to the railway, or tramway as I should say, and here's to another 100 years of safe, efficient operation. We do things pretty well in this country, and those of you holidaying abroad, you really don't know what you're missing. Thanks for putting up with my voice for quite a few minutes, but I hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll see you on my next video.